Hey there, and thanks for joining me. My name is Madelayne Klein, and you are listening to the very first episode of Life After Aryan. Have you ever read or watched something and you were so intrigued and fascinated you cannonball down into a rabbit hole on the subject and you just need to know more? Well, that's what happened to me a couple months ago when I picked up the book Autobiography of a Recovering Skinhead by Frank Mink. The book is a 10 out of 10 read, and I highly recommend anyone read it. But within the pages of Frank's story, he mentioned spending time at a house in Alabama that belonged to a man named Bill Riccio. Bill was the leader of a white supremacy / skinhead movement in the late 80s and early 90s. He called his group the White Aryan Resistance and later renamed it to the Aryan National Front. He was in his mid-30s at the time, but targeted and preyed on young, vulnerable teen boys, indoctrinating them with his hateful rhetoric and providing them with a place to stay and lots of alcohol. In 1993, HBO made a documentary following Bill Riccio called Skinheads USA. This documentary is mentioned in Autobiography of a Recovering Skinhead, and I sprinted to the internet to watch it. You can find it on YouTube in full. In the documentary, you can see how young and impressionable the boys were, how predatory and evil Bill was, and the events that went on out at the quote-unquote compound, including a celebration of Adolf Hitler's birthday, teens lounging around watching 1930s Nazi propaganda videos, and even a KKK rally. Filmed in 1992, over 30 years ago, I wanted to know where these boys were now. What happened to them? What are they doing? What do they think of everything that happened 3 decades ago, and have their outlooks and opinions changed? I turned to the trusty internet and found exactly what I was looking for. Today, we're joined by an ex-skinhead who spent 20 years in state prison and spent some time out at Bill Riccio's place as a teen. This is his story. Set the scene for me. How old were you?
All right.
How did this happen? How did you find yourself getting into this? I don't want to use the word community, but I guess that's kind of what it was.
It's really what it is. And that's the hardest part about getting away from it, especially once you develop a certain level of notoriety. I mean, you've got your own friend groups, you've got your own bands, you've got your own events, you've got your crews, and depending on what group you're in, like you have people all over the world that you could literally just show up somewhere and say, hey, I'm here. I need a place to stay. I'm this and, out of obligation. And they want you to be a part of that. So it gives you like a different kind of freedom, I guess. But so I had a great childhood. We were really poor, but I never really knew it because my father was a really good father. My mother started sneaking around on my dad when I was about 10. And she left me and my 2 brothers with my dad to be with this guy who made a little more money, but he also had a coke problem and kind of pushed that over on my mom. And then one day, my mom and him just kind of kidnapped us from daycare, she just showed up. We hadn't seen her in, months. And she just pops in and she's like, okay, you're coming with us now. And I mean, I was a kid. I didn't know anything about that. But within like 2 weeks, I noticed this new guy putting his hands on my mom. So I was 10. My middle brother was 5. My youngest brother was 3. So like I'm having to be the tough guy at the house and try to protect mom and the brothers and all that, and never ended well because the first time he didn't really put his hands on me. He just kind of shoved mom a little bit and I ran in and pushed him and he pushed me back and he was trying to make it look like nothing was happening, but it escalated pretty quickly after that. Like it ended up him putting his hands on all of us a lot. He would get all coked out and got my mom coked out, and pretty much from that age on started getting my brothers ready for school, getting them on the bus, making their lunches, doing laundry. So I kind of I went from being this really good kid, like I was AB honor roll, never wanted any trouble. I trained taekwondo, I boxed with my dad, I did judo with my dad. So I could physically handle myself, but I never really wanted to. Like I never had the reason to. And this guy that came into our life just really kind of made everything horrible, like overnight. So.
And did they take you out of state or out of the city? Like
no. It was still within the same pretty much in the same county, I guess you could say. But I can remember when everything seriously changed for me because I'm a bigger guy, but I'm really athletic and strong and fast. And I never played football. I tried out for football. I was 12, and they were losing their minds over me. Like, you've never played football before. Like, I went out for spring training. They're like, you got to start in position, yada yada yada. And then my stepdad showed up one day to pick me up from practice, and he was like, "Yeah, you're not playing this." And I was like, "Why?" He was like, I'm not taking you to practice and picking you up and doing all this crap. Like, I'm not going to be basically inconvenienced." And that kind of broke something in me a little bit because I'd never really been a part of anything like that. I'd played baseball when I was younger, but he had nothing to do with that. So from that point on, I started skateboarding, listening to punk rock and metal and doing my own thing. And I can remember this bully was picking on this girl that I liked on the bus. And I kind of called him out. I said, "Why don't you just leave her alone?" And he said, "Why don't I just get off the bus at your bus stop and kick your ass?" I said, "Okay." So we stopped. I got off the bus. He didn't get off the bus. The next day was Friday, and there was a little there's like an arcade and putt golf place near where we lived. And he said, "I'll meet you there tonight." So I was like, "Okay, fine." So I rode my skateboard up there, and he showed up with his cousin, and a bunch of people that I rode skateboards with heard about it. So they all came up there, and they had never seen me fight. I'd never really fought at school. I didn't do that. We got in a fight, and I mean, I beat the kid up pretty good. He threw a couple of punches. I blocked him, and then I kept punching him in his face until he said I stopped, and so I quit. And from that point on, like, the whole crowd cheered because this guy was a bully at school, for real. And the whole crowd was like cheering and I kind of got lost in that. And I was like, wow, something snapped in me that was like, I can make other people feel like I've been feeling the last few years. So from that point forward, I didn't really care about fighting. Like, I got interested in it. So fast forward to my freshman year of high school. A little backstory. What's funny is I grew up, my parents were hippies. My godfather owned land in Jamaica, and they were doing their thing in the 70s and 80s. And I grew up around Jamaicans. Like, I grew up around reggae music. I did not have a racist bone in my body. I didn't see it. I grew up in some pretty bad parts of town, but I always fit in. Like, nobody ever picked on me because I was white, and I never had any issues with black people. So I didn't really understand the race thing. So at 14 years old, I show up for school, freshman in high school, and some of the guys I rode skateboards with, two of them, they had shaved heads and boots and bomber jackets and chain wallets. And I was like, what is this look? I've never seen this. Like, what is going on? And I kind of asked one of them, because I knew one of them pretty well. And he was like, "We're skinheads." And I was like, "I don't really know what that is." I can remember there was the first pep rally. They were walking out of the school, and one of the jocks popped one of the guys' braces, which are suspenders. And he turned around and said, "Fuck you, jocks. I'll take you all on." So the varsity and junior varsity football teams jumped on these two guys, and they fought as hard as they could, but, they got beat up, obviously. I thought that was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen because they had no fear. So, like, literally, I was like, "Hey, Eric, I want to be a part of this." And they were like, "Okay, are you Aryan?" I was like, "Sure." By the way, I have dark brown hair and brown eyes. I am 100% not. I'm Native American and Italian. So, and they were like, "Do you believe in white supremacy?" I was like, "What's that?" He was like, that whites are superior over blacks. And I was like, "Is that what y'all believe that?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Totally believe it. Sure." So that's when I started hanging out with him. And I got caught up in the popularity, and I could fight. And that's really where it started, and the more I hung around him, the more I got involved, the crazier it got. And I ended up meeting Bill Riccio. So I'll say this. At 14, I met some of the original, like, old school, quote, skinheads around the Birmingham area. And really the platform that they kind of were on were like more into like country music and some of the skinhead music, and not doing crazy stuff and not committing crimes and not doing drugs. So I had that influence. And then there was a little bit of a rift. It was so silly and trivial, but some of the younger people liked metal and punk rock. And then some of the older school guys didn't like that. They liked country and some of the skinhead music. So it was almost a rift. So some of us younger guys kind of just branched off and kind of didn't know what we were doing for a while. And that's kind of when Bill Riccio popped up. He was an older guy that wore Slayer shirts and was into quote unquote skinhead stuff. But I mean, honestly, he really didn't know anything about being a skinhead. He was just some redneck guy that was caught up in this popularity thing. And it's so weird. If you read a book, there's a book called Silent Brotherhood. Have you ever read that book?
No.
Okay. It's about a group called the Bruder Schwagen. and that means the Silent Brotherhood. And the Silent Brotherhood was a group in the 80s that was alleged to be connected to the Aryan nations. And what they did was, allegedly, a bunch of those guys got caught eventually, but they would drive armored cars. Supposedly, there were $6+ million that came up missing that was never found. They assassinated a talk show host, a Jewish talk show host. They would bomb pornography stores. Like, they were pretty serious people. Bill Riccio was involved with him in California, which his real name is William Davidson, by the way.
Right.
Bill Riccio is his adopted name. So he was involved with them in some form or fashion in California. And if you look to the back of that book, you can literally thumb to the back of the book and it'll tell you each one of the people and what happened to them. Bill Riccio cooperated with the federal government to testify against some of those guys. So that's a huge red flag. We kind of found out about that. And we had some people that were in another state that sent us some transcripts of his testimony. So it was like, okay, there's so many red flags going on with this guy. And we had heard, and I had seen, so the skinhead movement that knew about and was a part of, they didn't do any drugs or anything. Bill, I started noticing, just hanging around for less than a year, for sure. I'm terrible with the dates, but I started noticing he would just go buy a bunch of beer for a bunch of young kids. And I guess I wasn't his type, so he never really hit on me. But I know multiple young kids, and they always kind of fit this certain stereotype that would be very skinny, very young looking, and extremely disenfranchised. So he would take them under his wing, and he would give them these red pills, whatever the hell those were, and he would buy just suitcases and suitcases of beer, and he wouldn't even drink that much. He would just sit back. And I kind of realized, this is not a good person to be around.
Oh, so you realized like right away?
Really, really quick, yeah. I was actually involved in that silly ass march in downtown Birmingham that was on the show you're talking about. I was on that with another group.
Can you be seen in this documentary? Can you see you at any point?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you've watched it.
Yeah, I have.
And are you like, oh
yeah.
God?
I'm in it twice, once in the very front of that thing, and I'm like, oh, fuck me. There's no way I can get that off of there. But at 17, I was involved with something else, a much bigger thing. It's horrible. I don't know if you know much about my case, or do you know anything about my case? You've heard about it?
I know the basics, just what's online. So the article that I read that mentions you, it kind of groups you into the 1999 or 1992 arrest after his compound was raided and everything. And then, and I think a little bit before, on Hitler's birthday celebration, 3 guys go out and kill a couple homeless men. You weren't involved in that.
No.
You were involved in something in 1991, correct?
So, right.
The way the article is written makes it sound like you were involved in
Doesn't it?
That incident. And just from a little bit of research online, that's not the case.
So my thing happened in a nutshell. A fight went too far. I mean, I've done my time. I've got no reason to lie about any of this. I drove the car. A friend of mine had a bat. A guy had an axe handle. They went at it. My friend won the fight. It probably was 15 seconds worth of scuffling. And I refused to make a statement. Everybody else that was at the scene that didn't see anything all made a statement that they were at least at the scene. They didn't see what happened, but they made a statement that they were there. I refused to even make that statement. So the argument was during my trial that if 2 people go to rob a bank, the person that drives the car is equally as guilty as the person that robs the bank. And my attorney said, yes. But if 2 people go to a bank and somebody goes in there and robs it and jumps in the car and you take off, the worst thing you're guilty of is failure to report felony. So it wasn't pre-described that this thing was going to happen. It was a freak thing. And there's a lot more to that story that maybe we'll get into one day. But these guys that weren't involved with the particular group I was involved with, they got made fun of. They got called like trailer park skins. They didn't fit in with anybody, but they heard through the grapevine what happened. And they thought that they could get some accolades or people would respect them if they went to the same spot 4 months later and just intentionally murdered somebody. And that's what they did. This wasn't a fight that went too far. They went to the same exact spot and this dude was asleep and they just stabbed him. and killed him. And then they threw the poor guy's body on the train tracks, hoping a train would run over and hide it. But they left the scene and went up a wrong way and got pulled over with a bloody knife, leaving the scene. So once they got caught, they're like, hey, something happened here months ago. We don't know what's going on with that. So that's how all of that started. Bill, so he blocked me on Facebook. I found his page. It popped up. He's since blocked me. I haven't said anything to him.
He's still around, hey?
He's literally still, his Facebook page has like him with like holding a big Confederate flag thing up. And that's what freaks me out. Okay. Because I know Ronnie and Lonnie Painter, both of them have done prison time, and they're twins, and they look just alike, and they're very tiny, very frail, very young looking. We actually used to call them the Sinead O'Connor twins because they look like feminine like that. Bill molested both of them. Kenny Loggins. Kenny was a guy that wasn't a skinhead at all, but he hung around Bill Riccio and all his guys. And Kenny Loggins, Trey Smith, Louis Mangione, I can't remember who else, but these guys, you don't really hear about this being tied to a skinhead thing because they weren't, but they still were hung around Bill Riccio all the time. These guys were big into the, I guess, satanic thing, whatever. And they picked up this female hitchhiker out towards, I want to say Springville, Alabama, and they killed her. And they cut her open and ate part of her liver because they thought it was her heart. Like they were doing some kind of sacrifice or whatever. They're still all locked up at life without or death penalty.
I had to Google these names after this conversation. Kenny Loggins, Trace Duncan, and Carrie Grayson were all sentenced to death in 1996. Louis Mangione received life without parole. He was actually just denied parole this year, July 25th, 2024. Kenny Loggins and Trace Duncan both got their sentences lowered to life without parole, and Carrie Grayson remains on death row. In June of this year, just 2 months before recording this, the state was seeking approval to execute Grayson by nitrogen gas. But this is a story for another day.
But Bill influenced these kids to just take drugs, drink as much as you possibly can, and do whatever you want. And I don't know how he has this influence over people because I spotted it 10 million miles away. I was like, this dude's no good.
Even at you were 17 and your spidey senses started tingling like right away.
Absolutely.
You are the exception to the rule, obviously, because there is something to be said about camaraderie and community.
Sure.
I compare Bill Riccio to like a cult leader.
100%.
He preyed on young boys that were usually looking for a place.
Father figures, something.
Exactly. And he provided them with a place to stay, and all he did was indoctrinate them. And when you're young and lost and looking for love in all the wrong places, you will swan dive into anything that is giving you that.
The perfect example is what I told you about my life is growing up as a child. Like I didn't know anything about the race thing. This could have been my friends that were involved in the skinhead thing. They could have been Bloods or Crips or Disciples. It could have been anything that gave me a direction and a purpose, and I would have jumped on in a heartbeat. I didn't know what white supremacy was. I didn't know anything about any of that. And I was just like, oh, you accept me? I can contribute how? I can get popular. Oh, you like me because I can fight? I'm in. And, when I got arrested for this, the crime happened when I was 17. I got arrested at 18. And man, I was still involved in everything I was involved with. And I took it very serious, and I did not cooperate at all. In hindsight, I missed 20 years of my life and my daughter's life, and my mother struggled through all of this. My whole family did. It wrecked a lot of people's lives. And not just that, don't forget, a guy did lose his life. It wasn't like everybody that was involved with it didn't do some form of a horrible thing. Guy lost his life, but because it was a black and white issue, I've told countless people, like, it did not matter. Race did not matter in this fight. It's not like it was like, oh, there's this black person, let's murder this black person. It was literally a one-on-one fight that went way too far. And it could have been a white person, it could have been anybody. The same thing would have happened. They don't write it up like that. And I get it. Media sensationalize anything at any opportunity. And I understand. I'm not bitter. I've done my time. I've moved on from my life, and I've been extremely successful. And I'm grateful for that.
Well, it sounds like you turned things around really well.
I learned how to do leather work, how to play guitar. I learned how to to weld, which led into my career here. I studied philosophy and I studied psychology for 10 years. And just dealing with people on that level for that amount of time, you have the most manipulative people in the world in prison that have developed their tactics. So they will do anything they can to just get a nickel out of you. It doesn't matter. So all of that transferred over well into my current profession because I basically interview and review people. There's certain mannerisms, there's certain things, there's certain responses that show me red flags and I'm either in or out. So it's hard to get things over on me. I'm super grateful to be past all of that, but I can easily see how if you don't have a father figure in your life and you are struggling to just navigate the world, like, man, it doesn't matter what group or what, it doesn't matter. Like anything that you come across that's going to validate you is what you're going to grab onto. But Bill, personal opinion, there's no way, in my opinion, and if you've gone down the rabbit hole, Bill, I'm sure you've read probably about Ronnie and Lonnie Painter and some of the other guys that he's messed around with. I don't know how things work in Canada, but I can tell you in the United States, if somebody comes out with a rape accusation, generally is followed up upon.
Generally.
Well, not one time has Bill Riccio ever been questioned, been arrested, been bothered about the whole molestation thing. Why is that? Is it because of his work with his previous entanglement with the government, with the federal government, testifying against those people? Are they turning a blind eye? I don't know. It's not my business, but it just seems mighty odd to me that this man can continue for decades to take young boys, bring them in, screw their minds up, have sex with them, and he's still doing the same thing decades later. It blows me away.
Multiple men have alleged Bill molested them as teens. Bill Riccio adamantly denies all of these allegations.
That blows me away too. And I've tried to find him, but I can't. I would love to speak with him because he's around my dad's age. I think he's a couple years older than my dad. So he'd be in like his late 60s now. And he's still on his same old bullshit.
Yeah, if you can, I don't know if you can do it. The last time I was able to see his Facebook, it was under William Davidson, and he was in northeast Alabama. I want to say around Fort Payne. So maybe that could help you. I don't know.
Okay, I'll start digging. Because I did search his name, his alias as well. There's so many William Davidsons. But yeah, I looked at profile pictures or whatever. I was actually looking for a Confederate flag.
Well, you'll find one with his. Last time I saw it, that's what it had. And I was like, man, the same crap, really.
And just with the age of the internet, recruiting people to his cause would be easier than ever. Because he used to hang around whatever, swimming pools, arcades, wherever young boys would hang around. But when you have the power of the internet and like-minded people can be all over the world, but so accessible, there's no way he's not still trying to lure young boys or whoever into whatever he's doing now.
His tactic was how I met him. There was a place in downtown Birmingham, Alabama, and it was kind of where all the punk rockers and skaters and skins and everybody just kind of hung out on the weekends. It's called 5 Points South, and there's like a fountain. It's really strange. It's in front of a church, but it's like a pagan setup. It's a fountain that has a goat in the center, and it's got all these animals in 5 different points around it. And he's reading from a book, and all of these animals are spitting water in the direction of and it's like, looks like a pentagram. So it's so bizarre in front of this church.
You're describing something very satanic.
It is. It looks like that for real. I'll try to, next time I'm down there, I'll try to take a picture and send it to you, and you'll be like, what the hell is this? But everybody used to kind of meet up there like this. It was just kind of a hangout spot in the late 80s, early 90s. And he would show up with a few people, and it was like he almost kind of had security, but not. But he almost tried to make himself out to look like some kind of celebrity. So he created a buzz where people wanted to come around and talk to him. And he would have like business cards or whatever. And hey, we're having a party. And that's how he started his recruiting. But the further it got in, he would get some of the kids who were hanging around him that were close. They would just go find people and bring them and party and hang out. And these people would be like, oh, I'm 15. I can come to this house and drink as much as I want. Woohoo! I gained a huge amount of humor that is still referred to as a compound when it was at the end of a dirt road cul-de-sac, and it was a dilapidated house that had a dirt basement. The floors were sinking in, and it was just a place where people could party without being messed with. That's all it was.
It sounds like a dump.
It was 100% dump. And if you watch that HBO special, you'll see it was 100% a dump. But It was also a place that he could hide, and there's plenty of parking.
Well, was it kind of out in the middle of nowhere?
It was probably 30 minutes south of one of the biggest cities, Birmingham, Alabama. And back then, it was even more rural. It's more built up around there now.
And like, he didn't even own it. He rented that.
Yes. And I know the person that owned it. It was his mother that owned the property. And she didn't know all that was going on, but she rented it just to this guy that worked at a transmission shop. Next thing you know, boom, there's HBO and all kind of fun stuff going on. But I mean, you could go out and shoot guns, drink, and police weren't ever there. So I mean, it was an easy place to kind of impress young people.
It sounds like a teenager's haven, what you're describing.
Yes, pretty much. And then you had a grown-ass man buying alcohol for all of the teenagers. So, woohoo, even more so.
You get enough people out there, it's a little family. It's a little community.
Sure, it can be, it could be, but it was such an absolute shit show. My God, it was just constant drinking, fighting, sleeping, people passing out outside. It was just absolute chaos. I probably hung around. It was definitely less than a year because I was working full time and I was also going to night school around that time. So I didn't have time to hang out and party all the time. I'll just show up occasionally and be like, oh, this is a place that I can drink and have fun and do whatever I want to do and yada, yada, yada. I rarely spent the night there. Most of the time, if I did, it was in the basement, which is weird. There was like a couch and a mattress on a dirt basement floor. So yeah, it's a cool place. It was super nice. I mean, if you look at it, this maniacal monster in some of his interviews in the HBO special, like look at his crazy ass eyes. And when he says, bring me your broken toys, I'll fix them. I was like, what the fuck is that all about?
Right? And like, I just found there are some lines in that documentary that are they're comical and they're not supposed to be.
No.
Some of the stuff he says, I'm just like, you are a laughingstock.
Yes. Look at your home. For one, straight, like trashy, like man, I can get not caring. You're a kid, hang out, whatever. But I'm sure wherever he lives, he's doing the same old thing. Probably looks like a homeless camp, and I'm sure he's still got kids hanging around. And I hate that. I really do.
And if they're not technically minors, they're very young. They're 18, 19,
For sure.
20. Incredibly young. Yeah.
So he had a lot of drugs going on, and I knew that was wrong, and it wasn't part of what I've ever been around. When that started getting more prevalent, I was like, this is a bad situation. And then people started going to jail more frequently, and there was more and more serious crimes. And then there was raids by the FBI and the ATF out there. It was crazy. The ATF raided 2 days in a row that I just so happened to be there because I'm a lucky guy. And one time they said that there was a runaway that was supposed to be hiding there, and she wasn't. Feel like they just did that so they could come look around. And then the next day they said they were coming looking for something stolen. I can't remember what it was. But I mean, I had a gun or two back then, but they were all completely legal. But they confiscated my gun and took it. I never got it back. I never even cared. But I know Canada's gun laws are a little different. Well, in Alabama, I don't know the laws now because I can't own a weapon anymore. But when you're 18, you can buy a rifle or a shotgun.
Like at a Kmart?
Well, there is no Kmarts anymore.
Oh, okay.
They might sell them at Walmart. I'm not sure. But the thing is, with the U.S., it's foolish not to have one in your home. If you have a family, and there's certain parts of the United States that are bad places, and if somebody just kicks your door in and they have guns and you don't, you're not in a good position. You run around carrying a gun on your hip like Wild Wild West. I mean, yeah, that's probably not something that everybody needs to do. But if you're of sound mind and you're not a maniac, you should probably have one. Anyway, we got diverted on another topic right there.
You said you were there at a couple of the raids. And I think the August of 92 raid was like the raid where he was arrested and then subsequently sentenced to like 40 some months in jail.
I wasn't there for that one. I missed that one. No.
You weren't there for that one. Okay. Just piggybacking off of the gun thing, I believe the 92 raid, they raided because of illegal weapons.
No. So.
Oh, no? Okay.
Funny backstory. There's a guy, I'll just say his nickname to avoid whatever. I know his real name, but his nickname was Bruiser. Bruiser was a cute, cuddly guy that was supposed to be Bill's security. Bruiser actually, he did something pretty disrespectful to my girlfriend one night. So I took her home and I came back. and I called him out. And that's kind of a typical thing. If you call somebody out, you go outside, you duke it out, whatever, you're done with it. You get this situation taken care of. Well, I probably took it a little far with Bruiser because he was a security guy, and I kind of was nervous that he might beat me up. So I said, man, you disrespected my girl, you disrespected me, bring your ass outside. We went outside and fought, and I roughed him up pretty good. He's the same guy that, so in Alabama, if you're convicted of a felony, you can't be within, I forget the distance of a firearm. So like, let's just say we're married. You can't have a firearm in the home with me because I'm a convicted felon. Now, you could probably skirt that if you had like a safe and only you had the access to it, or you kept it in your vehicle and only you had access to it, something like that. But I'm not allowed to be around one, period. That would immediately get you put in prison. So Bruiser took it upon himself because he was not a convicted felon. Bill was. Bruiser was Bill's security guard at events and stuff like that, and he was always armed. So he was within a proximity of Bill, and Bill, I think he pled out for that charge because he got less time than he was supposed to. Because, side note, Bruiser, this is such a crazy story. These guys showed up from Georgia one time, next state over. Somehow they had stolen stuff off of an army base, and it was weapons and grenades and all kind of weird stuff. So Bruiser ended up with a grenade, a smoke grenade, and the ATF was undercover. I kind of told you about that, right?
Kind of. What does ATF stand for?
Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. They're a federal agency, so they regulate all of those things. So they came up with a whole group that went undercover to infiltrate this whole system. It was just a bunch of kids. But what's sad is these are 30-year-old men, 30-plus-year-old men, and they would show up with just suitcases of beer and just put it out and let the kids drink and then try to trick them into committing crimes. Multiple times they came to me and tried to get me to buy guns and steroids and all kind of crazy stuff. And I was slightly smart enough to know enough about certain firearms where, like, back then, that was early 90s. And I saw one of the guys lift the seat on his truck and he had two MP5s. And an MP5 is one of the, well, at that time, I don't know much about them anymore. It's one of the fastest machine pistols in the world. It shoots a 223 round, and it's super compact, but it's also a federally issued firearm for the ATF and the FBI. The guy lifted his seat up and I saw two of them. And I was like, red flags. And I said, where did you get those? Because those weren't, back then, those weren't, you didn't see them. And he said, oh, I can get them all day long for $200 a piece. How many do you want? And I said, yeah, I don't want any. I was 17. I was 17 years old. And he's just trying to get me to commit a felony. It's so sad. I agree. Prosecute someone if they commit a crime, but don't trick them into committing a crime. That's horrible.
That's entrapment.
It should be. But anyway, Bruiser ended up with one of these smoke grenades from the army base that got robbed, whatever. And that same group, the ATF, traded him a 12-pack of basically generic beer for one of those smoke grenades. And that's what started the whole arrest for all of that. So for probably $4 to $5, he traded them a smoke grenade for it. And that started the whole thing with Bill and all them getting arrested for that stuff.
Oh my God. It's funny because it didn't happen to me.
Yeah, it didn't happen to me either. So, funny story, Bruiser was facing 30 years in federal prison. So in federal prison, the only good time that you get is it's like 64 or 84 days per year. So if you get 30 years, you're going to do 28, 29 years, whatever it is. Do the math. You don't get out on parole. There's none of that. So he was facing 30 years in prison. Well, he shows up to testify at my trial. And my attorney said, why are you here today, Mr. Bruiser? And he said, well, I just want to do the right thing. And he said, okay, I understand that. He said, you and got in a fight out at Bill Ricio's house one time, didn't you? And he said, yes, we did. And he said, he beat you up pretty good, didn't he? He said, yes, he did. And he said, you're not mad about that? And he said, no, I forgive everybody. So he's on this whole trying to make himself look good. So he said, your testimony is that you overheard a conversation in the woods, but you didn't see any faces, right? And he said, that's correct. And he said, okay. He said, can you tell me what the FBI is giving you for this testimony? And he said, because I know you're facing 30 years in federal prison. And he said, 30 years is 30 years. He said, but what was their offer for you to testify today? And he said, 9 months house arrest. 9 months house arrest. So he sits at home with the ankle bracelet, goes to work, comes home, and he's free. And he said, don't you think that's a pretty sweet deal? He said, yes, sir, it is. Yes, sir, it is. So instead of 30 years, he got 9 months house arrest for saying he overheard a conversation in the woods, but he didn't see anybody's faces. And he don't know who said what. But he's pretty sure it was me.
Oh my God. What?
Yeah, all that's record. That's public record. If you ever want to dive off into my transcripts, go and read them. That's public record.
So that was at your trial for the 1991 incident that he had nothing to do with.
Wasn't there, nothing.
Bizarre.
He just said, I was in the woods and I heard talking about something, and he said he kicked a guy, and he said, did you see him? He said, no, I just heard him, and it was his voice. So there's that.
I always say if I ever got sentenced to house arrest, I would just laugh at the judge because, like, I love staying at home.
I definitely would have. I would have preferred that.
Just to backpedal a little bit, the whole satanic, it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
I'm surprised at how quite conservative the skinhead movement was. And he's also got ties to the KKK and whatever. But that's all very religious based. They're all about God and like no hard drugs. And I don't understand why he was hanging out with Satanists.
He figured out an angle, in my opinion. He knew he would never be fully accepted in any type of actual skinhead organization or group, something that is legitimate. So he started these little factions of things. And in my opinion, him allowing or cultivating this kind of punk rock / skinhead / you can do whatever you want. You can be a Satanist, F everything in the world. I think that he realized that he has a broader net to catch people with, to bring more people in. Than all of that. He can never be a part of the actual, I mean, there's not really a like actual approved skinhead network, but I mean, any other major group in the United States and world would laugh him out the door, you know, I was a Hammerskin, and he would not have bode well in that situation. No, he wouldn't have done well. I mean, you do have precepts and you have parameters, and you have rules. I mean, one of the first rules I remember ever hearing, like, you can't ever talk to the media. He really liked talking to the media. I mean, he did a whole freaking HBO special. I mean, come on. So he freelanced, and really what he's doing, in my opinion, his niche could be Rastafarianism. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. He's going to figure out the best angle to be comfortable and indulge himself in the things that he likes and appreciates. And he will manipulate in any form or fashion to have that in his life. And he's still doing it to this day. And it's so sad that you have so many people that have been influenced by him in a negative way and have either lost their lives, gone to jail or prison, or been molested by him, and they'll never be the same. And he is still doing the same thing. And it's absolutely disgusting. It's sad.
It is. Well, I wonder if he's never been investigated for sexual assault abuse. Has anybody ever charged him for it? Like, I know men have come forward, but have they ever formally charged him and like went to the police station and been like, this guy did this and I want to see him pay?
That I don't know, but I can tell you this in Alabama. So I got arrested one time for a guy getting beat up, and it was by my apartment. Another guy did it, but they assumed I did it, allegedly. But I got arrested for it, and they put me in jail on a Friday, had a big to-do about it, and it was on the news as well. Guy's name was Paul. Paul came to the jail and was like, hey, didn't do this. Like, he did not do it. And they said, well, he's got to see a judge Monday. So I stayed in jail all weekend. I made bond. I had to pay $5,000 for an attorney, which I didn't have because I was a freaking kid. Get all the way to literally picking a jury for this case.
This is after the guy came in and was like, he didn't do it.
Yes, they still charge me, and we're picking a jury now. We're going to trial. So my lawyer comes back and he says, hey, man, he said, I don't advise you take it. He said, but they're offering you 5 years in prison because this was a first-degree assault. The guy got beat really bad, and he bled pretty bad, and it was bad. They beat him and left him in his car. So I said, 1, I didn't do it. 2, the guy that got beat up literally told you I didn't, and who did it. So there's no way I'm taking prison time. The judge ended up throwing it out. So the reason I brought that up is even if a victim of a crime does not press charges on you in Alabama, the state can pick up charges. So why has he not been brought up on these charges, even if these people have come out and have not gone through with it? Why haven't they picked it up? There's multiple offenders. So I don't understand that. But I understand they don't want to create work for themselves, whatever. But I understood why they did that to me because I had a very clean record. And when I went to trial for my case, the prosecutor asked me, Mr. Is it true you're arrested for first-degree assault where a man was almost beat to death? And I said, yes, but it's a yes or no question, sir. Were you arrested for first-degree assault? Yes, no further questions. The guy that literally told them I didn't, but it's on my arrest record. So they have that information. That was inflammatory, and they did that intentionally. And I get it. It's part of the game. I'm glad it's not part of my life anymore. The hardest thing I do these days is CrossFit. I might slow roll a stop sign on my motorcycle occasionally, allegedly. But yeah, I love my life. I'm very grateful. Had I not gone to prison, I would have definitely been killed for sure. I'd be dead by now. There's no doubt in my mind. I did not appreciate the length of time.
The incident happened in 91, but the trial didn't go until 95, correct?
Was it 94? 94. So I was arrested in 91, got out on bond. I was out on bond for a year and a half. We had the trial. Then I went to prison for a year and a half and I won my appeal and I got out for a year and a half. So then I ended up going back.
Oh, okay. You've mentioned your daughter that you missed. I couldn't imagine, like, I just had a baby 6 months ago. And if I go like a couple hours without seeing her, I'm like, I need to get home. Like, oh my God.
So I won my appeal. And in Alabama, that means that the prosecution has the option to pick the case up again or not. So they chose to pick it up again. So I was basically out on a bond while they were making all these decisions and everything. And well, my ex said, I want to have a baby with you. And I said, look, there's a possibility I could go to prison. She said, I don't care. I want to have a baby. I was like, okay. So we figured out ovulation cycles and she got pregnant and we had my daughter. And it was actually March. Yeah. So March, my attorney calls me in and said, hey, they're saying if we go to trial again and you get found guilty, they're going to give you the same 35 years. I said, all right. He said, we don't have any new evidence. And he said, we literally, this is not a joke. I didn't tell you this. The guy that committed the crime testified on the stand that he committed the crime. I didn't know anything about it. He did it solely on his own. And originally the jury convicted me and gave me more time than him. There's some politics involved with that. But they said that if I pled guilty and took 20 years, that I would be out in 5 years with the time that I'd already previously done, and that they would allow me to see my daughter be born. She was due in June. So I ended up taking the deal. My daughter was born. I got to be there. I got to spend 3 months with her. Hardest thing I've ever done. Kissing my daughter, handing her over, and walking behind those walls was brutal. I remember the judge saying, like, you got every reason in the world to do the right thing here. He said, look at that baby. And I said, I know. And I will. So I did that. And that's why that was my first real catalyst for change. So here's what sucks. Here's what I hate about the judicial system. So the police, the court system, the Department of Corrections, and the parole board are all 4 separate entities. So if the police tell you, hey, if you just take this right here, you'll get out on this date, none of that means anything. So I had the prosecutor and a judge tell me if I took this 20 years, I would do 5 more years if I did everything that was required of me, and I would get out on parole. First time I come up for parole, I did everything they told me to. I never got one disciplinary. I never got one citation the whole time. Came for parole, turned me down 3 years, turned me down 5 years, turned me down 5 years. The last time I went up, my brother has got a very successful business out of Dallas, Texas. And he said, all right, he's getting out anyway. He can live in my home. I'll pay him X amount of money per week to do this. We've got him set up, ready to go. And they said, Mr. It sounds like a great plan, but you and I both know why we can't let him go tonight. And that was it. That's all they said. So I wrote my attorney 15 years in. And I said, Mr. Mathis, you and the judge and the DA all told me if I took this 20-year sentence that I would get out after 5 years. It's been 15. This is his response. I'll never forget it. I can quote it verbatim. Dear Mr. Sometimes people with cases like yours find it difficult to make parole. Best luck in your endeavors.
That's it.
That's it. Best luck in your endeavors. So that's a very sneaky thing that they do here. They will just get the case to get the win, they will tell you anything they want, but every part of the judicial system is it's a separate entity, and they don't have to recognize or validate what anybody said to you previously. It's sad. And it's honestly how they get a lot of children to plead guilty that are 16, 17 years old. It's how they manipulate a lot of mothers into just do it, baby, get it over with, and you'll be home. And they don't realize that, like, it's more than likely in Alabama. I'm friends with a classification specialist in the Alabama Department of Corrections. And there's like probably 25, 30,000 people in prison here. And I think she said that she had seen in the last year that 2 people with violent crimes had been released. They turn everybody down and just keep you forever. So, yeah, it's sad.
Like, I mean, I get it and I don't. It's definitely a case-to-case basis. But you hear about like murderers. Well, maybe that's just in Canada, but like very rarely do people serve their full sentence here, at least. And isn't there jail math? Jail math is weird. Like if you spend this amount of time, you get credited this amount and whatever. But I guess not for you.
Well, I didn't spend time in jail because I made bond. So if you spend time in jail, then you do get credit for it usually. But my thing is this: if you look at statistics and you seem like a numbers person, look it up. Now, you can't count a serial killer or somebody of that caliber, but if you look at somebody that has committed a violent crime, whether it's an assault, whether it's a murder, especially if it's a young person, usually it's either a crime of passion, it's a fight that's gone too far, it's a drinking and driving incident, it's a rare occurrence. And usually if they go to prison for it, the chances that they reoffend are very slim because they had to spend a long time in prison and they realize, hey, I'm not about that life. I don't want this. Your people that keep going to prison, getting in and out, are usually your thieves, your drug addicts, definitely your sex offenders that cannot control themselves. But most of the time, your people that have assault and murder, they don't reoffend because it was some crazy shit that happened. Like, I've had so many correctional officers tell me, like, man, you're here because you got caught. I'm not because I did. Because everybody has dumb shit that they do when they're young and they get away with, and we've all had those instances, you know.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, you were 17 at the time of the crime. You obviously weren't charged as a youth. Like, did they not take into account that you were a minor? You were clearly tried as an adult.
No, what they'll do is they take you, generally depending on the severity of the crime, they will take you to the juvenile detention and you sit there for a couple of months, which is what I did. I was there for 8-9 weeks and go before a judge, and the judge listens to the evidence. And if they think that you should be deemed an adult, boom, that's what they do. And they send you straight to county jail. Your brain is not even developed at 17 freaking years old. Like, geez, they have a thing called youthful offender status. Why don't they use it? They don't use it in Alabama. That drives me crazy. So youthful offender status is, I think, anybody under 24 years of age. If you commit a felony, you're eligible for youthful offender status. But they rarely grant it because this is the Bible Belt. And like, if you do wrong, it's fire and brimstone. Like, why don't you use your programs that you actually have in place? Like, okay, if you get youthful offender status, I think the most that they can keep you incarcerated is like 3 years, and you go to a youth detention facility and they program you, whatever it is they do. They never let me do it, obviously. I've heard of very few people ever actually getting that program. And it's usually if it's a very minor offense and if the family has a lot of money. That's usually when it happens. If you're broke, your ass is going to jail. That's all I can tell you.
In Canada, our prison system focuses a lot on rehabilitation, which, I don't know, it can work and it can't, but that's what that sounds like, is they focus more on rehabilitating the person and to get them back into society, but money talks, I guess. For someone who was just in the getaway car, why were you sentenced for the longest?
I wasn't the guy that committed. Well, originally I was. But my case partner, he did 25 years. He's out now. And he's not involved in any of that stuff. He's made some poor decisions, but I mean, he's married and doing his thing and doing his semi-adult stuff. Yeah, he's turned it around pretty well for himself. But now, my thing is now I've mentored quite a few people and I still do it. I have contact with people who are still on the inside and I mentor them. I go see them sometimes because I know how much that means, especially if you don't have family or if you don't have family that can come see you and support you. I know what that feels like when you go months and months without seeing somebody from the outside and you just get a visit and you get to talk about outside things and you get to escape prison for a little while and get excited about getting back out. It's really important. If you don't have that, you can easily get caught up in, you can get caught up in some bad, dark places in there. Like you can get any drug, you can get any drink, you can do whatever you want in prison. People don't realize that, but you can.
Lots of people say you'll go to jail for a pot charge and come out a heroin addict.
Yeah, it's because you're going to do, from what I've gathered and what I did, people would ask me, are you ex-military? Are you ex-military? Because I did my time that way. I would wake up, I had a schedule, I would work out, I would go to breakfast, I would go to school, I would come in, I would work out, I would go to the hobby shop, I would do leather work, I would play guitar, I would airbrush, I would come in, I would read, I didn't really watch TV, and I would go to sleep. The worst advice I ever got when I got to prison was a bunch of the old timers, guys have been locked up for years and years and years, would say, the best thing you can do is forget about the outside world. That's some of the worst advice I've ever heard in my life. Because once you do that, 90+% of people that go to prison get back out. It might not be for a long time, but they all get back out for the most part. The worst thing you can do is forget about this, because once you do finally get back out, you don't really care and you can't involve yourself in society, and you get institutionalized and you don't care about going back. I do. I really despise prison and everything that is involved with it. So that's a huge motive. It's not even really a motivator for me. Like, I like helping people. I want to do positive things. I want to work. I want to make money. I want to see my daughter, my granddaughter. Like, I want to see my mother. I want to help my father until he's not here anymore. I want to go swimming. I love that. I love just interaction with human beings that aren't always trying to get something for you for nothing.
Well, and I think that speaks to the kind of person that you are, because lots of people, and I have someone quite close to me that is a good example, just like you. So he went to prison years ago, and him and his buddy went in at the same time. The person that I'm close with, he turned it around. He knew from the moment he went in, he's like, I can't be living like this. So when he was in prison, he worked on himself, worked on his relationships, all that. So him and his friend did eventually both get out. His friend is now dead. He is a very successful businessman with a family and has never looked back. So I think it depends on what kind of person you are.
I think also your example kind of solidifies this. I remember when I went to prison, I was in solitary confinement at first for 9 months, which is you're in a cell by yourself, locked down 23 hours and 15 minutes a day. You get to shower every, I don't know, it was a couple of times a week, whatever it was, but there's no air conditioning, there's no fans, and it was basically on the Florida line. So it was summer. There's roaches and rats everywhere. It was so hot at that place. The floor in there was kind of like a sidewalk type floor, but you would just take water and flood your floor and lay in your underwear in the floor. That's all you could do, and try to sleep in that.
For 9 months? Is that even legal?
It's Alabama. It's all legal in Alabama. What they do in Alabama is they will do whatever they want until you have money to get an attorney to file things to go to court. And then it will take it all the way to court. And then if you have enough money and win years later, yeah, they'll change it. If not, they do what they want. That's what's sad. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. In Alabama heat, Florida heat, you're triple digits in the summer, and there is not a single fan, no air conditioning, and you're in an oven. So you try to sleep at night and you're just pouring sweat. There's roaches crawling all over you. It's not a fun place. You can either get strong and do push-ups and squats and that stuff and pull-ups on the bars and read and try to make yourself stronger mentally, or you can just give up and do dope and escape. I chose to not go that direction. I think people either go one way or the other. And not a lot of people like me in prison, honestly, because people reject what opposes them. So if you're running around doing drugs and doing the whatever thing in prison, gambling, whatever, all the stuff that they do, if you're not doing those things, I had so many people tell me that I was arrogant. And I would say, okay, why am I arrogant? Well, you just think you're better than everybody. Well, no, I don't at all. I just honestly mind my business, exercise, and go to sleep. Why would you think I'm arrogant? Well, you just don't do this, that, and the other. And I said, you're right. I choose not to do that. I don't want to do any of that. I have no interest in doing drugs, smoking weed. I have no interest in drinking and getting hammered, because this is a dangerous freaking place. If you look at some stats this year for Alabama, the prison system, they have had more murders than they ever have. I'm sure it's from fentanyl, but people don't think about this. A lot of places in Alabama, your prisons, your dormitories, it's just an open dorm. So it's just bed bunk after bed bunk after bed bunk, and you can roll over and touch the next bed. beside you. You're that close. So if you have a disagreement with somebody, it's not like you road rage with somebody in the street and you're like, hey, screw you, I'll beat you up, whatever, and you go your separate ways. You never see each other again. If you and I have a disagreement and we're in the same dorm, I don't know if you're going to stab me to death in my sleep. So I can't sleep. Guess what? We had a disagreement. Now I'm with my shoes on up under my blankets watching. Maybe I have a weapon. Maybe I don't. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. Like, it's a different level of trauma that you have to learn how to deal with. And that's why I did not do the things that normal people do in prison, because I did not want to have to deal with that level of drama and trauma. And don't get me wrong, you're still going to have to deal with things. You can't get away. You cannot shy away from having to deal with situations, and it sucks when it does, but you can lower your chances of having issues if you're not doing drugs, gambling, homosexuality. What else? Drugs, gambling, homosexuality. Oh shit. Honestly, I've seen more people stabbed and fought over the television than anything. Go up there and try to vote out American Idol if you want to. You're gonna have a bad day, buddy. So right now, the Alabama prison system has a lawsuit on them, multiples actually. And the Justice Department, which is going to be the federal government, has basically told them they have to do X, Y, and Z to get these things in order. Obviously, you can't have cell phones in prison in Alabama. But if I was able to, and I could send you photographs when I was there, you would not believe it. I was in a dorm with 400 people, and all of us got a stomach virus, and it was coming out of both ends. And they had, out of 20 functioning toilets, maybe 10 of them worked. So there's people throwing up and pooping outside. There's people that don't have beds that are sleeping on the floor, on the hard concrete without anything. It's literally third world country stuff, and people are dying. I had a friend of mine 2 years ago, Mother's Day, he got murdered in prison. He got in an argument with the guy. They got into a fight. The dude was in prison for strangling somebody to death, and he got knocked out, and the dude ended up strangling him to death. I knew his daughters. I knew his mother. His mother and my ex-girlfriend used to ride to the prison together for visitation. Chris was a good guy. He struggled with some drug problems, but he lost his life there. I've known a few of them that have gone that route. It's so sad, man. I've had to block people that will sneak a cell phone in prison and send me a friend request. And usually the first thing it is like, hey, man, glad to see you're doing good. Send me some money. As soon as they do that, I'll block them. If you want to catch up and talk, I'm cool with it. I'll come see you. Like, I just went and saw a friend of mine 2 weeks ago. Great man. He started a couple of rehabilitation programs in there. One of the most honest, solid people I've ever met in my life. He's one of probably 3 people that could walk out of prison, move in my home. I wouldn't think twice about it. Just a solid person. I'll go support you to the ends of the earth if you're that type of person. But if you just out of nowhere randomly message me, you're like, hey, can you send me some money? It's over. I know what you're doing. I'm good. I will not contribute to that behavior.
And nor should you.
No, and nobody should. I tell their families, like, if they're telling you they're being threatened and you have to pay people for this, or they need all this extravagant money for food and clothes and all this stuff, I said, you need to stop. Don't send it. They're doing things they're not supposed to be doing, and they'll figure it out or they won't. The more you contribute, the worse it's going to get.
It's enabling them.
That's 100% what they're doing. I've recently came in contact with a group. It's a woman that's trying to start a nonprofit, and her husband's locked up, and they're trying to start a really cool re-entry program. I thought I was going to do really great and be fine when I got out. But when I got out, I had probably a year of trying to navigate how to get my head out of my butt. One of my psychologists, I didn't have a psychologist in prison. We had a psychologist who would come in and teach classes. It might be depression, anger management, whatever it was. But I can remember him telling me, when you go to prison, that's where you stay emotionally. You are fixated at that age emotionally when you go to prison. And I said, I'm going to disagree with you. He said, you can disagree, but you're going to be wrong. I said, well, I disagree because I keep close contact with my family. I stay up on the news. Like, I don't get caught up in the prison stuff. He said, those are all commendable, but you don't understand. You're still stunted. So I was like, yeah, you're full of shit, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, I got out and I realized, like, holy shit. I got out, and my male-female adult relationships, I was really stunted. Like, I was like a 20-year-old trying to date, and I didn't know how to navigate. Like, and I'm doing all this horrible stuff. Like, I'm cheating, I'm being weird, I'm being shady. And it took me like quite some time to realize, like, hey, you're like literally acting like a child. Grow up. So yeah, I missed all of this time developing emotional bonds and relationships with my partner. I didn't get to go through all that. So I had to kind of retrain train and learn all of those things. And it's cost me some really, really good relationships, like amazing relationships. And it's been a hard lesson, but I want to be involved with some of these programs to kind of give these people, these guys, and probably women too, like a heads up, like, hey, even though you think you really got it together, you have to be hyper aware that you don't have it together. And if you can acknowledge that and say, hey, you know what, I don't have my shit together, how do I get my shit together better? Man, if you just go in blind, arrogant, you're just like, hey, I'm making all this money and doing all this cool stuff and screw everybody else. It's a horrible way to live, and it's shady, and there's very little honor involved with that.
And what do you think could help that for people that are serving time to not stunt them? Therapy, or is it something that they really just need to work through when they get out? Like, is there any way to combat that? When did you go away? 95 to what, 2015?
16.
20 years? That's a long time. And the world changes a lot.
Yeah, it's very embarrassing. And that's why I want to get involved in this, to try to soften the blow for a lot of people, because I was so embarrassed. I didn't know how to get gas. I didn't know how to do self-checkout. I didn't know how to use a debit card. I didn't know how to use a cell phone. I'd never had a cell phone. The only cell phone I ever had was like a flip phone, and I was gone before you even did the texting from the numbers like thing. So I was so far out of my element, and I felt like such an idiot. And I had a girl I was with originally, and she would help me, but I would literally, in the middle of somewhere, I'd just throw my arm up and be like, I need an adult.
Well, it's things we take for granted that if you don't have them, why would you know how to use them?
Exactly. I didn't know about any of this, but if you have somebody coaching you and tell you, okay, I need you to get your mind prepared, that you're going to go through this, but it's going to be okay. Take baby steps, learn, and just move forward. You're going to be embarrassed. Hey, man, ask questions. That was my thing. I always want to try to figure out my shit on my own. And that's such a hard thing to do. To this day, still, like computer shit, I'm like, God damn, what is my Apple ID? Son of a bitch. But I think everybody kind of does that. Mentally preparing people. Right now, I have a friend, been out for about a year, and he was extremely successful before he went in. He did 20 years, and he is used to being not necessarily bougie, but successful and able to do the things that he wants to do, and he can't. And he's making shit money, and he's struggling. He's living with his parents, and he's definitely drinking too much. And he's done the whole dating app thing that I did when I got out. And I was like, man, when you get it out of your system, let me know and we'll talk. He's getting there. I've never met anybody that's more well-versed in philosophy and religion. You will not out-talk that man right there in that show. So he's starting to get his head straight, but it's every morning at 5 o'clock, because he knows I get up super early. At 5 o'clock, I get a text. Good morning. Hey, have a great day. Blah, blah, blah. Doing this, that, or the other. It's every morning for the last year that he's done this. And he needs that because it's part of his routine. Having a routine in prison is kind of a cheat code. And people don't realize that. So if I wake up at 3:30 every day, get a quick workout in, go to breakfast, come in, take a shower, go play sports, come in, read. If I have that routine every day, you literally cannot tell the difference between 6 months and 15 years, other than crazy events that happen. Because you think back, you're like, well, what was I doing? I was fucking getting up at 3:30 doing this. And it's literally the only way you can kind of cheat the plan. And that's how I did it. And it was like, yeah, in the middle of it, it really sucked. But looking back, like it seemed like it kind of went fast, but I learned so much. And should I have gone to prison? For sure. For what I was convicted of, I disagree with. For the length of time, I also disagree with. I am grateful. I'm not bitter. Like people, even my current girlfriend, she's like, doesn't it ever make you mad? I said, why? What good is that going to do? Like, no. So I put in for a pardon. And a pardon, it's not going to completely erase your record. But what it's going to say is, hey, he committed this felony, but we're going to remove the felony from his record, kind of. But he can't own firearms, but maybe he can vote. So that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to vote.
You can't vote as a felon?
No.
Oh.
No.
It's wild to me that he can't vote, but could run for president if he wanted to. But I digress.
So I put in for a pardon, and I'll tell you right now, if I forwarded this letter to you that a nurse wrote for me, I did hospice volunteer work in prison. My friend Charles, he worked in the hospital unit, and he's like, man, we need help. And I was like, what do you mean you need help? Because he was a good guy. He meant well. He was on a good path. And he was like, I mean, we got people in prison dying, dude, and they're dying alone. You have like one nurse for like 40 people. So I was like, well, I mean, what do you propose? And he was like, well, they have a hospice program. They just don't go by it.
And I was like, what's the hospice program? And he was like, you go up there and you just sit and help take care of people that are dying. I was like, all right. So I convinced one other guy to do it with me. They had a state nurse come in and did like I forget how many hours it was. And everything he said was bullshit. He was like, you're not going to be required to do this. You don't have to clean up this. You don't have to do that. And it was all bullshit because you got one nurse for 40 people. And if you're sitting there caring for somebody that's dying, and they poop on themselves, you're going to clean them up. If they throw up on themselves, you're going to clean them up. If they need a bath, you're going to give them a bath. If they need their teeth brushed, you're going to brush your teeth. But the first guy I sat with was Leon Harris, and I'll never forget it. I first met him. He was cantankerous, mean old bastard, but he was dying of stomach cancer. And I first met him. He was walking around fine and talking. And I'd go up there a couple hours a day and just hang out. And then it'd get to where like he could eat less and less. And then he couldn't stand that long. And then he'd need a wheelchair to walk with. And then it got to where he had to be in the wheelchair. Then it got to where he couldn't get in the wheelchair himself. Then it got to where he couldn't bathe himself. And he was a very proud man. And once you kind of go through that transition with someone, it gives you, you're a mother. It's really like you're taking care of a child. And you will protect that child at all costs. And I would pick him up. He got to where he was maybe 100 pounds, skin and bones. And I would pick him up and put him in the wheelchair and take him and undress him and put him in the tub. I would wash his body. I would put lotion on him, brush his teeth, get him back in the bed, make sure he's turned every 2 hours. But we had nobody else helping us. And it was just me and one other guy. And we would do 12-hour shifts in addition to working and working out and school and all that stuff. So it was a lot, but it scared me more than anything in my life. But it's also was the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. Because when I left that prison, so many people that appreciated me and kind of looked up to me got involved. So it went from just me and another guy to like there was a rotation of 12 to 14 people that would pitch in and just go and get it done and not have to do 12-hour shifts. They would break it up in 3-4 hour shifts. It changed a lot of people's lives. But one of the nurses that was there, she had heard about Leon. It was my first patient. And she had just started there. And a bunch of people told her about my case. And she wrote a letter for me for my pardon. And it's probably 3 or 4 typed pages. And she was like, I heard all the stories about and I tend not to judge people on their past. I judge people on what they actually do. And she said, the amount of care that this supposed skinhead, racist, horrible person gave this black man was the most amazing care that I've ever seen anyone given. And she would help me out a lot. And she was kind of a mentor in that aspect. But she wrote me this huge letter and she sent it to me in my email and I read it and I had no idea that she knew all of that and she thought all of that about me and just watched me. That's probably the most proud thing I am of prison because it taught me more about humanity, humility, and man, all of us are going to go. And I don't know if it's more sad when somebody dies that doesn't have anybody in prison or if they have family because the family doesn't get to see them that often. And man, there's some horrible shit that goes on in prison if you die in prison. Like one guy I sat with, he had liver cancer and he was dying. He was failing pretty bad and he slipped and fell when I wasn't there. I'm pretty sure he broke his hip. And I came in and he was in such pain. And they thought he was just trying to get more pain meds. Well, fuck, you got liver cancer, you're dying, you're in hospice, like you're going to be in pain. The doctor came around, he said, Doc, I think all the guy wanted was a fucking x-ray. The doctor could have humored him and just said, okay, we're going to get you an x-ray. So he's like, I think I broke my hip. It's killing me. I don't know what to do. It's killing me. And the fucking doctor said, well, it's okay. It's not a big deal. You don't have long left anyway.
Oh my God.
It broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart. It makes me emotional right now.
Is the hospice area, does it kind of look like a hospital-ish?
No, it's all individual cells around it's not a tower, but it's an elevated platform with a cubicle. And then you have cells all around it. And some of the cells have multiple beds. But if you're in hospice, you have a single bed and you're in a room by yourself. Here's why we had to do 12-hour shifts. It wasn't because we just wanted to. It was because if you're not there, if you're not a hospice worker taking care of that patient, their cell doors lock and a nurse will check every so often. So me and that other guy were like, well, fuck it. We'll split it up. I'll do 12 hours. You do 12 hours. I did day shift. He did night shift. I remember I almost went to lockup one time with my first patient after it was probably 2 months in. He was bad. He was close to the active phase of dying. And I'm sitting there with him and those doors are steel and concrete. And they're probably 300 pounds or so. So if you push the door open, aggressively, it's going to hit the concrete wall and make a loud noise. So I'm sitting there and I'm just talking to Leon, and most of the time he's sleeping or whatever. And if he's semi-conscious, whatever, I'll talk to him, just letting him know I'm there. And I hear boom, and officer kicks the door open, just slams it. And I turned around and I was like, what the fuck is that? And he said, how much longer does he have? And I said, Leon, shit, he might outlast me and you. And I stood up and I walked outside in the hallway and I pulled the door up and I said, don't you ever fucking do that again. And he said, you need to check your attitude, inmate. And I said, I don't give a fuck what kind of badge you got on. What you just did was shitty. That could have been your fucking brother, your fucking son, your father. He could hear every fucking thing you say. I said, the fact that you did that tells me you're a fucking horrible person. He said, I'll put your ass in lockup. I said, I mean, you can do that if you want to, but what you did right now was morally wrong. So fuck you for that. And I turned right back around, went in the room, and he didn't fuck with me, luckily. I don't know why he didn't.
He realized he picked the wrong person today.
Well, you can't fucking do that to people, man. I think he might have said, you know what, that was kind of shitty. So hopefully he thought that. I mean, you're not going to beat all the officers up. They can send 50 and just stomp you into the earth. But maybe that made him realize, hey, that was actually pretty shitty. This is a fucking human being that's, regardless of his crime, he's going to fucking die alone in prison. And that was kind of fucking terrible.
That's what scares me about really anyone in positions of power, be it prison guard, police, whatever. There is an unbelievable amount of cruel ones who seem to think that they're better than others.
I don't know if I would agree with a large amount. I would say there are some. I've actually met some that are good people. And I actually have contact with quite a few that were sergeants, lieutenants, COs. They learned quickly I wasn't a snitch. And I told plenty of them, like, they'll come up and try to get information about dumb shit. And I'll say, look, man, I don't do illegal shit, but I'm also not going to tell on people. You wouldn't want me to tell on you. I'm not going to tell on them. That actually, they respect that. I was like, you don't respect those people that give you fucking bullshit information for a cheeseburger. You don't. And I'm not going to do that shit. I'm not that person. I'm not going to compromise my morality for, whatever you have to offer. Don't ask me those questions and I won't tell you any lies.
To backpedal a little bit, did you get pardoned? Did you get a pardon?
No, they turned me down.
Our guest asked to remain anonymous. At first, I was almost confused, as he's obviously a very different person than he used to be. He has so much to be proud of, and I'm positive his story can and will help or inspire others. But here he explains why.
It sucks so bad when you work so hard. One thing that I hate about being a felon is they tell you, okay, once your time is done, it's done. You're good. But that's not the case. Like, I've did my time and I've done great, and I've exceeded expectations and devoted time and help people, and it doesn't matter. Like, they'll look it up and you're like, you don't get a chance. I did my entire sentence. I have never been in trouble since I've been released. I literally started that hospice program that's still thriving. Anybody that's in the state that's dying wants to go there because of that hospice program. I've been in a professional career for years now, and I've mentored a bunch of people, and I don't know how else you can do it. There was a representative from the DA's office that showed up, and she actually said, what did she say? I want to try to be specific. She said, the audacity of Mr. to try to apply for a pardon, it befuddles or it flabbergasts me. I can't remember what she said. Either one of them. And I was like, the DA and the judge told me if I do this amount of time, I'm square with the house. So I've definitely exceeded that. So you're telling me I'll never be square with house. That's what you're saying. Like, should I just stick my head in a hole or kill myself because I was part of this? Like, I've done my time. It's over.
Well, and also, you're a very different person. 1995 was a long time ago.
Well, 1991 was definitely a long time ago.
Or 1991, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not who you were at 17. Hopefully no one is when they're an adult.
Your frontal lobe is not developed until you're in your early 20s.
I was just going to say that. You took the words out of my mouth. Your frontal lobe, I believe it's 25 when it's fully developed.
Yeah, it's around that age. It takes a 17-year-old that's been beat since he was 10 and stick him in a gang environment where, hey, you're tough and violence is the best thing. And I mean, it's a recipe for disaster, but my God, I know people that haven't learned from that. I do. And they're either dead or back in prison. I'm neither. I promise you, unless something crazy happens to my daughter, my granddaughter, something like that, I will never do anything because I love freedom. I love my career. I love my gym, my motorcycle. I love the ability to walk out on my back deck in the middle of the night if I want to and just get some fresh air and look at the stars. They were so long, I couldn't just walk out at night and look at the stars. And I don't sleep well. I know I've got PTSD from slamming doors, the microphones all night, all day. You never get any solid sleep. I'll just wake up all the time. And like I woke up at 2:30 this morning, went out my back deck, got me a bottle of water, and just sat out there and looked at the stars and took deep breaths. And I was just grateful. Most people don't do that shit. Yeah, most people are like, I can't believe I'm fucking awake and I got to get up at this time. And I'm just like, shit, man, I'm so grateful for this. It's wonderful.
When I started this podcast, I was just curious to hear about experiences with Bill Riccio and time spent in the white supremacy movement. I figured the stories would be very interesting and others would be interested in hearing them. And maybe I'm just a little bit nosy. But what I didn't expect was to like this guy so much. He's articulate and well-spoken, easy to talk to and listen to, and just generally a nice guy. I learned so much beyond my original idea. I learned about how vulnerable people, especially young people, can be when they're looking to belong. Events and choices that lead people to crime, prison life, life after prison, and the American judicial system, and its many flaws. And perhaps most importantly, maybe people can change. This conversation also made me question my view of the Youth Justice Act, as we call it in Canada, which I staunchly opposed prior to hearing our guest's story and experience. I'd like to thank our guest today for talking with me and telling us his story, being so candid and such an open book. And I'd also like to thank you, the listener. Don't forget to like and subscribe and maybe even comment depending on what platform you're listening on. You can follow me at Madelayne Klein on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks again for joining me, and you'll be hearing from me again sooner rather than later.